In her speech, Greening the Ghetto, environmental activist Majora Carter asserts that sustainable development can and should be pursued in New York City and the rest of America. Carter bases this claim on two reasons. Her first reason is environmental justice. She explains that
no community should be saddled with more environmental burdens and less environmental benefits than any other.
In her speech, she applies this idea to New York City, explaining that the South Bronx unjustly bears burdens such as excessive waste treatment and power plant exposure without enjoying benefits such as the many parks found in other portions of New York. Her second reason for sustainable development is what she calls the triple bottom line. By this, she means that sustainable development can benefit the developers, the government, and the community. To demonstrate that this type of development is possible, Carter points both to the work that she and her organization have done in the Bronx and the work that Mayor Enrique Peñalosa has done in Bogota, Colombia. She concludes with an impassioned plea to her audience to work in support of sustainable development. After watching Majora Carter's presentation, we were very moved by the things that she said and the way she said them. This led us to wonder how pathos interacts with logos. That is, how do emotional appeals affect logical arguments? As we explored the depths of Carter's speech, we discovered that pathos can either support good logic or hide faulty logic.
In order to understand how pathos supports or hides logic, logos, we will consider the two following examples. First, a cult leader is giving a speech to his followers. He impassionately invokes everything that they fear, love, and trust in his speech. Any outsider analyzing his claims would soon find them ludicrous, yet because of the emotional appeals that the speaker uses, his immediate audience accepts his argument. In this example, the pathos the speaker employs hides his faulty logic.
Now consider a thesis dissertation. Although the speaker's arguments may be sound, if she cannot capture her audience's emotions with pathos, she will not move them to action. In this example, pathos is necessary to support good logic. With these examples explained, we can now examine Carter's presentation. In one portion of her speech, Carter uses pathos to support her argument against the developments in the South Bronx, arousing sympathy and anger in her audience. She says,
I do have a problem with developments that hyper-exploit politically vulnerable communities for profit.
The sharp words that Carter uses here cannot help but evoke emotion. Carter uses terms like hyper-exploit to paint the Bronx residents as victims of injustice at the hands of malicious developers. Carter's strong word choice stirs her listeners against the cold-hearted developers who would craft such vile plans. The emotional response of her audience, in turn, reinforces her logical arguments for why these developments in the South Bronx should be corrected.
While much of Carter's speech exhibits the ways in which she uses pathos to expertly supplement her argument, at times she uses pathos in place of sound arguments. For instance, consider what she has to say about the impacts of environmental injustice.
These impacts are coming everyone's way, and we all pay dearly for solid waste costs, health problems associated with pollution, and more odiously, the cost of imprisoning our young Black and Latino men who possess untold amounts of untapped potential.
Notice that Carter is naming environmental planning responsible for incarcerating the residents of the Bronx. There is a logical slip because in reality, most people do not end up in prison because of pollution. Here, Carter takes advantage of her audience's reception of her primary argument about health problems. She captivates the audience by talking about how everyone will be affected by the environmental conditions and arouses pity for criminals by painting them as victims of environmental injustice rather than the authors of crime. Carter's thick rhetoric carefully covers her logical slip. With another pathetic appeal, Carter uses an enthymeme to appeal to people's emotions when talking about her brother.
My big brother Lenny fought in Vietnam only to be gunned down a few blocks from our home.
In this enthymeme, Carter's unstated premise is that a better environment will lead to less gun violence. This claim is at best unsupported and at worst untrue. Nevertheless, Carter's emotionally gripping story pulls the listener past this fact. Her story draws attention away from her unstated premise and focuses the audience on a U.S. veteran who survived battle and was rewarded with death in front of his own home. With this narrative, she is able to play on the audience's sense of justice and patriotism to get them past her weak or faulty logic.
In each of these examples, we have learned about how pathos interacts with arguments, but why does this matter for you as readers and writers? Carter's claims seem reasonable when a reader, or in this case viewer, is held spellbound by her pathetic appeals. However, as active audience members, you should not be so emotionally attached to a speaker that you are willing to accept everything he or she says as fact, without considering the evidence and motivations prompting their statement. Pathos can powerfully impact audiences in a short amount of time, so it can be a very powerful device for persuasion. When writing, be careful not to unfairly deceive your audience. In general, be aware of pathetic appeals, and do not blindly believe a speaker because of a great emotional story.